and 6. I'm ready. Vinny?
Where's yours?
It's in my truck still.
Dude.
No.
We're not going to open the door unless you have a Bible.
I know. He won't come in, so at least we can do the window. Wave the passcode.
I will not answer the door. You got your Bible.
Answer the door.
There you go.
Until you show up with your
It'll
Bible.
become a joke, you guys.
All right, so okay, here we go. Last week we were doing these 5. Interesting is the book is really shifting in gears. Chapter 7, chapter 6 is actually the last chapter where he is just kind of addressing what he's heard about the church, and like so, chapters 1 through 4 kind of about the vision. Chapter 5 was about a specific instance of sexual sin going on with a guy sleeping with his stepmom. And then he talks about you got to get him out of church. Like, you can't just sit there acting okay. With this guy acting like it's okay. Everyone acting like there's not a problem going on here without saying anything, confronting this person. And chapter 6 is where he just finishes up a couple more issues of things he's heard about going on in the church. Chapter 7 through the end of the chapter, the end of the book, 7 through 16, he starts to actually respond to their questions by 16. I mean, right. He starts responding to questions that they've asked. That gets very important as we progress from chapter 7 on, because you'll hear start talking like you know what he's talking about. Well, he was replying to a letter. So to them it made perfect sense. They asked him direct questions. He was giving direct answers. We have to try and assume what did they ask. So here we go. Chapter 6. I won't spend too much time on some of this stuff so we can spend some more time in chapter 7. If any of you have a matter against another, go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints. Do you not know the saints will judge the world? And if the world be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Do you not know that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? If you then have judgments concerning things pertaining to this life, do you appoint those who are least esteemed by the church to judge? I say this to your shame. It is so that there is not wise man among you, not even one, who will be able to judge between his brethren. Brother goes to law against brother, that before unbelievers. Now therefore it is already utter failure for you that you go to law against one another. Why do you not rather accept wrong? Why do you not rather let yourselves be cheated? You yourselves do wrong and cheat, and you do these things to your brethren. Let's stop there, I guess, verse 8. We really just started reading the first 8 verses. We've been sidetracked with things.
There's no way to keep this show. Okay, it's not Jerry. Oh, Jerry.
Be a good night for Jerry.
I fell hard right now. I got RKO'd by a girl just straight on my back.
Bartle!
All right.
Right now?
Yeah, like right
You
there.
don't know.
I was like,
Like,
yeah, I was like this.
You
So you like
All right, children.
Where's Jerry?
Show up early if you want to chit chat. All right. We just read. Stick that in it. Here, take the big one for big boy.
Thinking about life.
you do? Because you
Name's
can't
Henry.
Mine
Tell
goes.
the page.
Mine goes. I think he's gonna get 6 right now.
Wait, you're a different book, darn it.
Like,
It is. Oh, you're not. Oh, I thought you had your Bible with you.
I'm like New King James.
Your truck is the same thing. Same with your truck's out there.
Oh my God.
Okay, yeah, that's at least a better excuse than Jimmy. His truck's up there, and he says his Bible's in his truck.
It is. It's like literally.
Oh,
right there. You know what?
Oh, it's in like 1,000.
659. Yeah.
Totally getting a special one for
That's
Joanna because she's
and
special.
lady. Claw machine. I know. It's right there.
We're trying to make this like inner ring more baby proof, just like this area. All right, so let me just summarize what we just read. We read verses 1 through 8 of chapter 6. That's like we just read the verses straight through when you guys showed up. I mean, all it's talking about is, and as I mentioned before, showed up, is that Paul's addressing things he's heard of that were going wrong in this church in Corinth. And this thing he addresses in chapter 6 is simply the Christians in the church were suing and like taking other Christians to court. And basically what he's going over is just that if you're really a Christian and the person you have a problem with is really a Christian, you definitely should be able to deal with your issues outside of like court. And by that, it's not like someone murders someone. If someone breaks laws, that's one thing. But he's talking about like lawsuits, suing people. That's not like breaking law, right? Lawsuits say they can be related to breaking laws, but it's like, no, it's like we had a disagreement over something, so I sue you over it. It's not like you stole something of mine. This is like they were over issues. And it's just pretty straightforward. Paul tells them, it's like, you guys are going to be in charge of bigger and better things today. And why is it there's not a single person in the church who's responsible enough to care of this thing? Verse 5. Is it so that there's not a wise man among you, not even one, who will be able to judge between his brethren? So just saying, like, is there not a single guy in your church you guys can go to who you trust and say, hey, you tell us what's going on? You know? That's why it's nice having someone you can turn to who's a Christian, who you can talk with other Christians, that you can just basically say, hey, how would you handle this situation? You know? Longer movies are tease you. Anyway,
Let's go.
I'm just joking. But, you know, it's nice that, like, when you have Christian issues with other Christians, that in theory, two Christians could go to a pastor, someone they trust, that is wise, and that they would hear what they had to say, especially because one of them might not hear that they're right. But they would trust that a mature person could look at it and give them a mature biblical bit of advice. But here they're suing people. And he's just basically saying, like, it's different if you're dealing with people who aren't Christians. It's different when they deal with each other. But if we're doing things with other believers, we should be able to handle ourselves without having to get other people involved. And it goes on. Basically just saying, like, that you have, that the brother goes against, that goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. That you're taking non-Christians who don't have the same high standards that we have to judge our problems. And so that's just, you guys shouldn't. In honesty, I don't even know much to say about verse 3, do not know that we shall judge angels. There's something about, and that there's a few small references in the Bible. Sometimes you will get little tiny pictures of someday when the demons, right? They were angels at one time. But that will play some part in the judgment, that the believers in heaven will actually be moved to be above the angels and will have part in that. She's such a distraction. Okay, verse 9. Any questions on that one at all? It's kind of straightforward thing. It's an interesting thing. It's worthwhile to think back on when you start running into problems with other believers and like the temptation is to go to court. You feel like you have to sue someone to get stuff out of them. Are we thinking the same story, or is there like, huh? Okay.
Like that.
Oh. Well, I think like Josue and the whole thing with him hit with his car. Like I was asking him, like, The guy goes to church over like the girl's dad or whatever. He was telling me all about it. It's like, yeah, it shouldn't be that Christians have to like worry about being swindled by other Christians. You assume they'll deal with things without those problems. But I think a lot of it just gets down to at the same time we go back to chapter 3, right? The mediators, drinkers, carnal Christians versus like people who are in their faith. And there's a lot of people who they don't walk the walk, they're walking.
Yes.
Do you drink anymore? Try blood, see what happens. If she drinks, she can go down to bed. Even though she's awake, yeah, she can go to bed.
I'll put down.
All right. 1 Corinthians 6, 9, and 10. Let's put those two together. And you guys can ask all one. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of God. Let's read the next verse just to keep it in context too, though. As were some of you, or as were some of you, but you were washed, you were sanctified, and you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God. So he points out to these guys, like, here's the list, but as you all were on this list before too. But you guys had your sins paid for, and therefore you are no longer on that list anymore. But it's one of many lists in the Bibles. Revelation 21:8 is another similar list where it says, like, but the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all have their part of fire. So here's these lists that just lists off, like these are kind of examples of sin lifestyles. God's children.
Did you just say sorcerer?
I did. Revelation 21. Here's an interesting thought about sorcerers, Jimmy. Since you brought up actually one of the more fascinating ones in Revelation 21:8. The word sorcerer is Greek. The word that they call sorcery, that gets translated in English, is the Greek word pharmacia. Guess what English word comes from that word? Pharmacy, pharmaceuticals, which is related to drugs. Back in the day, it was just drug-related stuff. It's funny that people talk about how drugs are in the Bible, but actually that word pharmacia, sorcery, and drug use were tied together back in these days. And it was that sorcerers were known to take things. They had their, like, today, right? Does it make sense that almost all fantasy we have today is derived from truth? Almost all fantasy football, it's like based off of fantasy, it's based off truth. No, but you know what I mean? That it's like fantasy today. We hear about dragons. It's based off dinosaurs. And if you take a few dinosaurs and put them together, you pretty much have your dragon. You take the wings of a pterodactyl, you throw it on the body of a T-Rex, and you're getting like a scary big dragon. And you just mix different dinosaur stories together. You see where people came up with these other stories. That said, I could go on and on and on and on and on. What's interesting is this. Oh, it's too much of a rabbit trail. We spent hours in this junk. Crazy story for tonight. Genesis 6. God destroyed the earth in the worldwide flood. It says the sons of God came down and laid with the daughters of Eve. The sons of God in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the only way that word is ever used, the whole time is speaking of angels. So Genesis 6, it doesn't, like, if you don't know that phrase, anywhere else in the Bible, you read the Old Testament. It's a Hebrew thing, not a Greek thing. The sons rejoice when God created the heavens. The angels rejoice when God created the heavens. The sons of God, it was a phrase used for angels. It talks about angels in people actually like making children. And if you hear about like where they put them, and you hear about like how they were condemned to a special place, it's like in other books, putting all that stuff together. You get into Greek mythology, hear about all that kind of stuff. That's all the place the Titans were supposed to be, is the same place that these things were supposed to be. That same Greek words. You go to the Greek. There's all these stories. Mythology comes out of it. All that said, when we think of sorcerers and wizards and all that kind of stuff, what are these mixing together? There's potions and thises and that's, right? Well, no, back then, sorcerers, they were making potions. They were known, this is what they did. But a lot of that stuff, truthfully, was consumed by them, and that would give them special powers to see into things. What's interesting, I know many pastors, and even myself, as some of you heard the story, have had not personal experience, but dealing with drug use and like possession. And stories where like people using drugs actually have issues with actual like demonic things going on. And like I said, I told the story, I'm not telling it again right tonight, but like you're in Grandview, I get a call from the social compass to say the day because someone's going crazy. And yeah, they were using drugs, but this was not like a drug trip. This was something totally different. Like they described it to me, I got there to see all the aftermath, and yeah, it was pretty freaky. And I was telling the guys, yeah, you read the Bible. People, these sorcerers would use drugs, and that would somehow, whatever it is about drug use, reducing enough of your own brain power and opening you up for something else to come in there and influence you. No, that does not mean that all like effects of drugs are all spiritual. There's just literal, you get high off drugs. There's all these stories and connections there. So religion, like sorcery, the more we see it, actually is a direct point in drug use on that list. I'll throw out there too, just for the apologetics study into faith. If anyone ever does bring up drugs in the Bible, you know what is the Bible. And this is just a simple math formula. Why is drinking sin? Why is drunkenness? Not drinking, drunkenness.
Alters your state of mind.
Alters your state of mind. Why do you think God would not like that?
Because you're the one inflicting on yourself.
Inflicting on yourself, it changes the way you think. What kind of decisions do you make?
Not
very good ones, right? Is drug use any different? In the sense that it affects the way you think, it affects your state of mind, it affects your thinking process. Great thing is always this. Drunkenness isn't wrong because God calls it sin. God calls it sin because it's wrong. Lying isn't wrong because it's a sin. God called lying sinful because it's wrong and it hurts people. Right? They're wrong because the Bible says them. They're wrong because they're really wrong. They're bad things. And God just says, no, all these bad things, I'm going to call them sin. Not like, well, I can't do it just because the Bible says it's wrong. No, he called it wrong because it was bad for us. So, this list kind of on the same category. Moving on, verse 12. Interesting verse. You can see this in Romans. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Foods for the stomach, some for foods, but God will destroy them both it and them. Now the body is not for sexual morality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. I'm going to pause right there. I just went too far. Verse 12 is a cool verse. Romans also has this. And actually, I think even 1 Corinthians 12, or 1 Corinthians 10, 23. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful, but all things are not edifying. Basically, what he's saying to these guys is like, as a Christian, in a sense, I have a lot of freedom of what I could do, but not everything's good for me. Not everything's helpful for me. And I should not become under the power of anything. So it's talking about like, a great example. Gillis brought up when he was here, like how Gillis chose to give up video games is one of the things he did. But for him, he found out that it was at the point in his life where it was not helpful. And since I will not be brought out under the power of anything, like he was like, yeah, I was pretty much addicted. I was playing so many hours of video games. And he still has his hobbies. He still plays little games. He doesn't play on his phone. He can't play anything. Point being is that he just realized he was getting brought under the power of something. It was awful, but it was taking over his life in more of a way than he wanted it to. You can have hobbies you're really into. You can be a really big football fan. Football can become your idol. You can be a really big video game player. It can become your idol. Should be pointed out. It can be your business. You can be a professional gamer or game developer. That's true, but it also can go too far, just like anything. Nicole could share. She's so shy she'd never do it, but I'll do it for her. Right? When she was in college, Nicole suffered from a very extreme exercise addiction. She was working out 3 to 4 times a day. And it was really unhealthy. Exercise. Right. You can take anything too far. And it was girlfriends in college. All the girls were like our bridesmaids at our wedding. She started going to church in college. When she first really started going to church, they called her out on it. Like, you know what? You're taking this thing too far. This goes back to the last when we were first Corinthians 5. We were talking about what if the Christians called out the other Christians when they saw problems? They didn't just let things linger. We call out our friends, even when it's hard. I hate doing that. I don't like confrontation. I really don't like how you call people out on things. I'm in a position where I kind of have to. It's not easy for me, but I still find myself doing it out of necessity. I know that it'd be wrong for me to just watch people go down paths and never change. Even tougher when it's my peers, or God forbid, someone who I think of even as above me or something like that. You might be put in a position where you need to call out. So anyway, all things are lawful, but all things are not helpful. I'm going to jump down. Okay, 14. We read on. God both raised up the Lord and moves up us by his power. Do you not know your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them the members of a harlot? And then members, think of body. To dismember someone is to cut off a body limb. So members body parts, the limbs of Jesus. So he said, should I take the limbs off of Jesus and attach them to a harlot, a prostitute? Certainly not. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a harlot is one body with her? For the two, he says, shall become one flesh. That is God speaking to Adam and Eve. For a man shall leave his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh through sexual intercourse. And he's talking about the bond that happens there. But he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him, God. Therefore, verse 18, flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does outside of the body, every sin that a man does is outside the body, but he who commits sexual immorality is against his own body. For do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, whom you have from God, and you are not your own, for you were bought at a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. Marisa.
Is that why when he had a bear, I mentioned we had that thing against.
Who had an affair?
No, it's in the Bible.
Good, that's good. Big book.
Yeah, I can't remember. But he had an affair, but then he said that not only have I sinned against you, but I sinned against myself. And
David, Bathsheba?
Yes.
And
we talk about stay away everything a man does outside, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body.
And what it's talking about is just that there's something different about sexual sins. And we had a talk recently, I don't know who's we. I was talking with someone recently, Maybe it was last week, maybe it was individual, but all sin is equal. Kind of like all cookies are equal. So all cookies. But some cookies are better, some cookies are worse. The idea is that all sin is equal and separates us from God. No matter what sin you've done, that was enough to receive the penalty due for sin. Whether you've done 10 sins or it's all going to be the same in the sense of what the end result. But he does talk about certain sins having more significance than others. In 2 Timothy, he talks about a man who does not provide for his family is worse than an unbeliever. That's a big accusation. And to be worse than an unbeliever, to me, shows some kind of severity level to it. Either way, sexual sin is lump sum, though. You never see one sexual sin over another. Key there is, like, for instance, you never see, well, for the most part, you see homosexuality lumped in with fornication. Heterosexual sex outside of God's design for marriage. Homosexual sex outside of God's design for marriage. Baby's happy about it. The big thought is this, though, is that God had an ark where they had the 10 Commandments inside, Aaron's rod, and some manna, a golden box, right? Angels on top, and a little seat where the Jews once a year would pour the blood of the sacrifice to cover the sins of all of Israel. It was in a tabernacle, a little tent construction for a while, until finally they built the Jewish temple. It sat behind a veil, a big drape, a curtain, made of wool, material, one layer was wool, that was over 8 inches thick. Wool blanket 8 inches thick. I don't know what the height. It's tall, though. They're like 3 stories tall. It's very, right? And the high priest was only allowed to go into that room one time a year. If the priest ever went in the room at any time other than that one day a year when he made that sacrifice, he'd be struck dead. And it was said that God's presence dwelt there. Like God, like who he knows what it looked like, but supposedly filled the room, and the Old Testament reference is talking about the experience. This room being actually physically filled by God's presence, and he'd be in the room. But when Jesus died, someone still get his words. His dying words are, "It is finished," which also means paid in full in the Greek. There was a giant earthquake, ground split open in Israel, and that giant 8-inch thick veil was torn in half from the top to the bottom, from heaven down to earth. And the thing is, now God says, my spirit, which used to be reserved to that room with all these special rules and all these special things, I will now freely give to every Christian to live inside you. And now you are that temple for the Holy Spirit. Never before did God freely give anyone access to the power of the Spirit. Samson in the Old Testament, God came upon Samson, did mighty things. God came upon David just like Goliath. God came upon David's mighty men. There's a lot of people in the Old Testament that God, his Spirit will come upon to do some things. But it was never like open door, anyone wants it can have it. And that's where Peter in Acts, at Pentecost, he was like, yeah, God said back in the book of Joel that I'm going to pour out my Spirit on all flesh. So that's kind of a big deal. God, like your body is something really special. Because now I'm going to give my Spirit. I said, I don't want you taking my temple, your body, and running it all over the place and attaching and connecting it in places where it should. And we're going to get into, I'm just going to take this right on into actually the first 5 verses of chapter 7. Because this is basically talking about don't ruin God's plan for sex in your life, doing it the wrong way. Because chapter 7 now talks about the right way. And this is one of those chapters that, like, I know I joke because it's like teenagers and young people, teenage boys. I'm not trying to make any boys, but hey, these are the way they talked in high school, but they didn't. Now concerning the things of which you wrote me. So we're shifting gears now. He's now going to start replying to things. But he's just coming off this whole don't do sex the wrong way. You guys wrote to me about stuff. FYI, before I even read this, I'll give you the really short what was going on in Corinth. There was two groups. There was the Epicureans and the Stoics, two Greek philosophies on life. One of them had this whole idea, you know what? We should just do anything we want with our bodies because really we're spirit, right? So we can't really do anything wrong to our bodies. We could drink, we have sex, whatever we want. It's just our body because our bodies become someday and our spirit will live on untouched. So yeah, that for these other guys who had this idea that was like, no, like our bodies are evil, all flesh, all things are evil. We need to stay away from everything. And they would actually subject themselves to like torture and pain, thinking it was somehow making them more spiritual. There was a story of a guy who lived on top of a pole for 30 years to subject his body. Another guy who chained himself, I don't know how many pounds. There's all these stories of these guys who were famous for this philosophy. And crazy extreme to show how they could subject their body to torture. Either way, though, these guys thought the complete opposite. Sex is bad together. We can't even I shouldn't be married. I should never have sex ever. I should never do anything with that stuff. So they were going off in another direction. So that says, Paul saying, concerning the things you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Paul, these guys are saying that you should just never ever have sex. So Paul's saying, you know, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, and this could carry on quite a while, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. He's telling them, let people get married. Let the husband render to his wife the affection to her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except for with consent for a time. They may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and to come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Alondra, can you wrap her down? Wrap her tight in her bundle, lay her, leave. You're too young to hear this stuff anyway, so. So, verses 1 through 5. Now, Jimmy had the pleasure of being at the men's retreat, where honestly, some of this stuff, he bounced off this chapter, because the chapter we were studying. Some of the coolest and best teaching I ever heard on marriage, relationships, husbands and wives, was at that retreat that Jimmy got to go to. Gillis was there, Paul was there, Lewis was there. And I mean, it was serious. Some of it was mind-blowing for me. But here's one of the things I liked. We talked about is that the plan God had. He created man. He created woman for each other. When it talks about the two becoming one flesh, one thing I like that Ken just blew my mind with, that I love, was the idea that God made Adam in the fullness of the image of God. Meaning, like, I'm God, I'm going to put everything about who I am into you. It's not a perfect representation, but all the parts are there. But then he took Eve out of Adam. And with her, he took a lot of who he is. And from there on, generation after generation, men have certain attributes of God that are not dominant in women. Yet in women, there are certain attributes of God that are not found in men. An example, as he said, he joked that Adam wakes up from his sleep that God put him into, and he's like, weird. I'm supposed to sleep. I wake up, it's feelings. I don't know how I feel. I can't describe how I feel. I feel I have no feelings. I figured it out. I have no feelings. He said, and there they are, standing over there. They look good. And talking about women naturally have more feelings than men have. It's just natural. Right? But then, guys, other characteristics that women don't have naturally. Jimmy has a phone with something really important on it. Well, injured, but not burned. Hurting. Jimmy breaks easily if you haven't watched the football season this year.
Whoa.
All right, so, but point being is that Jesus is God and had the fullness of God in him. And Jesus did a very unmanly thing when he wept over Jerusalem. Right before he entered it and did a very manly thing and made a whip and kicked out of a bunch of people, knocking over tables and beating people with a whip. He had the fullness of God in him. I do think that we can all strive a little bit like Jesus and get a few of those attributes. But the idea is God said, now I've got man and I've got woman. And until you bring them back together again, you don't have the complete picture. And it is together united that we have this complete picture. Now here he actually says, in case there's any question, let the husband render to his wife the affection due her. If you look at the Greek word, what that means, it literally in the subnotes, it says like it's basically another way of just it's a euphemism for sex. Long story short. Euphemism is where you say something a little bit nicer than saying the real thing that's kind of harsh. As in, like Judah when I was not able talking to, right? I think Anthony knows what a talking to is like. Who else? I know I've talked to Barbie boys. They know what other talking to is like. But yeah, it's there's our vocab word of the night, euphemism. It's you use a little light word instead of saying, you talk about the birds and the bees. It's euphemism. Saying something a little bit lighter than saying a legit thing. Anyway, that's what it's saying right here. Though. It actually specifically talks about in a Christian marriage that the men and the women should never be withholding sex from the other ones. It's actually a very important part of a very healthy marriage. And so he's telling these people, they were like, not have sex will be more holy if we don't have sex. And he's like, no, there's nothing more holy about that at all. Don't do it. And ironically, I like in verse 5, do not deprive one another except for consent for a time. And it's like, well, the Bible says I can withhold, for a little while. Well, yeah. As long as you're fasting. So as long as you can go eating, you can go with withholding sex. Jimmy laughs. He's just like, I'd make it hours. No, anyway, the point being is this, though, is that it's not supposed to be something you see in a Christian relationship. And what does he say? Because if you really want to do something, you know what? We're going to fast from sex and food. The idea literally meaning, like, why do we fast? One reason is about cutting off meals for a little while to focus on prayer, to focus on God. And every time, like, one of the biggest things, if I fast, I'm hungry, that is my trigger to remind myself I'm praying about something. I remember specifically doing some very long fasting with my coach. His son had leukemia. And every time I was hungry, I prayed for little Jordan. That was my reminder. So a married couple can make a choice to pray, and we're going to have sex for a short period. Food and sex. And I think about, man, I wish I had my wife right now. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to. And I'm going to be praying about something. But then he goes on to say, but come so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Where am I looking? I'm looking ahead down there, verse 9. But either way, it's an important part of Christian marriage. At the same time, not having sex outside of marriage, it's an important part of Christian marriage. Here's some thoughts. Another thing I like that Ken, this is a real simple concept, and this one hopefully will bring more true to the guys, because this is, I think, God designed men and women differently. And although you can't put everyone into one, you can't say that like no men are really emotional, no women can power lift. I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just one you can't lump some of it, but they're generally more muscular. That's the point you made. We were designed to do certain work and jobs, and we were designed to do that. Women were designed to have babies. They have features that make that work. But the point was that men are very attracted to women. Hopefully. And just saying, no. And it's interesting. He said this, and I thought, guys, you can think about this for yourselves, because I will say right off the bat, 100% true, 5,000% true. He goes, a woman can look at a sunset and go, that's such a beautiful day. They can look at the fall leaves going down the street, right? And you can sit there with her, your girlfriend, your wife, and she's staring at this whole sunset. And an average-looking girl wearing an averagely modest outfit walk in front, and you be like, and I attract, because guys are attracted to girls. You could get crap about a sunset. There's a girl around. And it's a purposeful thing guys have to do to focus away from that, to save that for their wife. Great for guys, it's called Every Man's Battle. Actually, Every Young Man's Battle. You guys are old enough, I'd say you can read the bigger boy one. There's Every Woman's Battle book. But in there, it talks about like when guys can learn to focus 100% their attention to the wife, how much it does to the relationship, as opposed to when a man is openly interested in all the girls in the cheerleading team, on the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, or you have why do you bunch of Cowboys anyway, right? No, and then or watching everything down to pornography. Which, I'll just throw this another bonus tidbit out there. People who look at pornography before marriage almost definitely will continue to look at it throughout marriage. Marriage does not fix those problems. It's like a drug. You feed it, you need it. So, what he's talking about, though, is that men are really attracted to women. Well, God did that on purpose. God didn't mess up when he made men. And because of that, it is supposed to attract you to your wife, to your spouse. And so, got my 4 men here. Listen, so you find a guy who meets qualifications. That's the key. But the idea is that if a man, this is something Ken said. I'm giving all credit to Ken. As I said, in my mind, it's a cool thing. If you just like Genesis 1:3, so God making out of an Eve, and I made them the way He made them. He's like, if man's first interaction with woman and her body and everything was his wife, the connection and bond that's made there. But when a guy has seen hundreds and thousands of girls in movies, on the internet, previous girlfriends, it really dulls the effect of how special life is, how special that bond and connection is. It's true that, previous sexual experiences do take away from what's going to happen in marriage. And I can speak from experience. God can do a healing. He can help you get over that stuff if that's a mistake you made in the past. But it's just like anything else. Scars heal, but they're usually always there kind of lingering a little bit. So better avenue is to avoid those things or avoid making the same mistakes twice. Either way, Christian marriage is just saying that's a part of healthy marriage. And the way it should be directed is 100% at each other. And he's saying, if for some reason you're not, make sure you guys get back together because Satan will tempt you. Because you guys have a lack of self-control, men and women. And it talks about the affection that's due. So guys, that also does mean like women have needs that are different than guys. Women have different needs than guys have. Making sure that you meet those needs and that the girl's meeting your specific needs because they're different. Help making sure they keep coming back to the same place for needs. Because it is when a guy stops making a girl feel loved, and you want to go through the Bible and talk about relationships and marriage. Because we're talking about like more divorce and technicality of marriage, not what does it take to have a perfect marriage. But perfect marriage is simply two things. There's the whole Bible, and there's a whole good marriage series that Gil owns, and I've got maybe a copy of one on. Love and respect. Everywhere throughout the Bible, the same advice is given. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. Men in the room know what it means to be respected. From childbirth on up, we want to be soldiers, we want to be firefighters, we want men that have respect, the captains of teams, the conquerors of sports. We want respect. And from the one person we definitely expect it from is our wife. If our wife doesn't look up to us, it's utterly devastating. Flip side, women need love. They want someone who will take care of them, be there for them, think that they're free, think that they are special, that they're worth everything to them. If either one of those needs don't get met, render the affection that's due to her, and likewise also the wife to the husband, people start finding it in other places. And that's where temptation ensues. Someone at work, someone somewhere else is so nice, and they laugh at all your jokes. They always compliment you on how you look. My husband never compliments me. Well, my wife never seems to think I can do anything right, and she thinks that I'm like Mr. Fix-It, and I'm Mr. I can open a heart open jar, you know, macho. And it's the thing is, it'll get in there and it'll create quite a big problem in relationships. All right. This is a long chapter. We'll get as far as we can. Oh, yeah. 6. Now, I'm going to say this is a concession, not a command. Paul's saying this is like, I'm letting you know it's not like a thou must do this. Verse 7. I wish that all men were even as myself, single. But each one has his own from God, one in this matter and another in that. But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I. Paul's saying, if you can remain single, and here's a key word, a very, very key word, because some groups think that, like, you have to be single. You have to remain, you have to stay single. If you want to be a religious leader, you've got to be single. So the idea is you have to remain single. But this is saying, no, it's a concession. And here's the concept. Maybe one of us is definitely not me. But maybe one of you guys aren't that interested in the opposite sex. Not like a homosexual thing, but just like I'm okay being single. I just no desire to date. I'm okay. You might, I'm not guaranteeing this, and it could be because your age. I'm saying some people actually have a gifting to not feel the desire like they have to go and get married. And what he says here is, and he goes later to talk more, if you're single, you can get a whole lot more done for God. Because you don't have to worry about your kids. You don't have to worry about keeping your husband respected. You don't have to worry about keeping your wife feeling loved. You can focus on God alone. And so Paul says, again, hey, I wish you all could be like me, because I'm getting a lot of single. Imagine this, Paul, right? Paul, he was beaten, he was whipped, he was drowned, he was stoned, what if he had a wife and kid? He could endure those things himself. I don't know if he could endure that happening to his family. It was a gift that he was able to minister as a single man. Like he said, he was okay with it. Realistically, we can talk about this later too. Paul was actually married previously. I'm almost certain of it. For 2 reasons. One, he said, as being a Jew, he was perfect at keeping the law. I don't have the quote in front of me, but it's not in the Bible, but it's an old like rabbi-style Hebrew quote. Like basically, if you were not married and multiplying, you were a sinner. Because God's command was to be fruitful and multiply, not have and eat. So to a Jew, if you were like 22 and not married yet, something was wrong. So one of the ones married is that. Secondly, he in Acts talks about how he cast votes to kill Stephen. He had the voting with the Sanhedrin. They're leading their like religious leadership group, council, and you had to be married to be part of that council. More than likely, he got saved, his wife left. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But either way, now he's single and he's just telling people, God may have given you a gifting, but you don't feel like to be married at all. Not gay. I'm just throwing that one out there. It's like, I'm not saying like I just don't like it because no. He's just like, no, I'm fine. I'm definitely the more attractive sex to me as a guy. But I just don't feel like I need to get married. But in verse 9, he says, if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry. Better to marry than to burn with passion. This verse has been horribly taken out of context by young couples who think I need to get married right away because we're really horny. Right? It's better to marry than to burn with passion. I can't hear any longer. Let's just get married now. So we can just end this. I've seen people do it, and people quote this, right? Well, it's better to marry, better to... Nicole and I had a short, like we dated 3 months. We were only engaged for 10 months because the summer was not far away. We wanted an outdoor wedding. Weather in Ellensburg is cold this time of year. So, but either way, what people are like rushing into it. It's just, honestly, hint for the people who are going the distance in the room. When you're really serious about your faith, you find a member of the opposite sex who is equally serious, it's not hard to relationship work. Once you guys realize, wow, this person is like really into their faith, I'm really into my faith. She's all the ring. Didn't take much more thinking. And it's beautiful because marriage will always work if you both continue going down the path together. If not, well, you have to find out where people's hearts are at. If your hearts are one by God, it's becoming force to continue that heart down that path. If people's hearts are strong for different things, this is and that, we can go later, later in this chapter. You get married, all the problems that can be ensued from that. But the main thing is that people say, well, yeah, it's better to get married than with passion. I'm saying, if you could be single, go for it. Paul's just saying, you could be single and you wanted to dedicate your life to God, it would free up your time. But if you can't exercise self-control, meaning like you have a natural impulse to want to be with someone of the opposite sex, don't live your whole life burned with this passion inside you, like, well, I've got to be single because I got to be more open to the Lord, but I really wish I had someone. He's like, don't do that to yourself. Go find a spouse. Old Testament Proverbs. He has a wife finds a good thing. And it's the same flip side for girls. It's in the Bible. You find his wife finds a good thing. So we cannot call getting married wrong. Boom, verse 10. But now to the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. Walkie-talkie. Out of your room, suck it up, kiddo. Okay.
I need a baby. Where's your monitor?
It's another.
Baby. I'm just going to tell him to use the potty.
And then, okay, Anthony versus 10 11.
Now to the married, I command yet not I but the Lord. A wife cannot depart from her husband, but even if she depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. A husband is not to most of the wife.
So, interesting verses. He's talking about, now here again, people in Corinth, so what were they writing Paul that he was talking to? People were separating partly just because they thought it would be better. Well, it's better to be single, so let's just separate. He's like, no. Get back together. Don't separate. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you guys. to the believers, to the married believers. He will later talk about a believer and an unbeliever. So this is Christians. Wife, don't depart from your husband. Husband, don't divorce your wife. But if the wife departed from her husband, it doesn't say divorce, it says departs. Just separate. Let her remain unmarried. Be reconciled to her husband. What it's talking about, and we'll talk a little later, right now. I'll say this. There are some extreme examples that I think you could biblically argue that God would want someone to go through. I.e., like physical harm to the wife or the children. You separate. I would say this, though. Some people are really quick to use the divorce thing. It's like, can we separate? It could be for a year. It could be for 2. Or you have to be married. That you could separate for a year or 2 and see if the person comes around. Or see if the person departs, which we'll look at in the next few verses. The idea is you can separate for a reason. And it's saying, you know, a family might just decide to separate for whatever reasons, but they're not going off to get remarried. They're just keeping their distance. But it's like, you know, but they recognize their marriage vows. They made a choice before God to do this marriage thing. And we're not gonna just go off and marry someone else. Just always marry someone else. I'm not happy anymore. I'm not in love anymore. I'm not in love like the way I used to be in love. The Bible only gives 2 specific okays for divorce. One is sexual immorality. And Jesus himself even said that it was a concession. Not what we sell at basketball games, but a concession like, guys, in the Old Testament, is that right? I think it says God hates divorce. That's God's view. And God never changes. So he didn't think differently in the Old Testament than God's divorce. He doesn't want to see it happen. It breaks his heart. But he says, as a concession, I'm going to give this to you. I'm just going to concede and give it. You know what? If your spouse cheats on you, I understand that you could not maintain a relationship. You didn't want to. Meaning, I'll let you get divorced because of how hard that would be for you to go through. But he says he hates divorce. And I know people who have chosen to take back their spouses after their spouses were unfaithful to them, and they made their marriage work again. And it was a great testimony because that's exactly what God did to Hosea in the Old Testament. We talked about this last week. God asked his prophet Hosea to marry a prostitute who would continually cheat on him and go off and actually be a prostitute and sleep with guys for money. And he had to keep taking back. And God said to Hosea, I'm asking you to do this so that you can show everyone what I do for them. That I choose you guys, and you guys go off and sleep around on me. I keep taking you back, and I keep taking you back. I'll never get you guys out. No matter how much you cheat on me, I'll never stop forgiving you. And so, all that said, adultery and the unbeliever, the next few verses.
One time I was talking to Gillis about it, and I was like, "What if what if your wife ever cheats on you? Would you forgive her?" And he said, like, without hesitating, he's like, "Yeah, I would forgive her, and I would take her back, over and over again." And I was like, "Well, why?" And he said that because he's like, she's the love of his life, and he wouldn't be able to live without her, so I would take her. Like, what do you think about that?
No, and that's the thing. It's like that's a personal issue, a heart issue. That's what God's saying. Like, God just basically said, like, you know, along if your husband cheats on you, and you just can't get over it. If it just eats you away, and it's just never the same. And he just talked about how important to him sexual sin is, how significant that is. If you can't get it, Alondra, I won't blame you if you have to leave him. But it doesn't mean I don't want you to try to work. That is all it says. That just shows Gillis' heart. You know, that he's saying, yeah, like, I would forgive her. So that's the thing. He's not saying, oh, green light. No, it's saying, like, I'll give you guys this one, but only this one. And so, yeah, I mean, that kind of answers the question. Like, Gillis just shows his heart's at for his wife. You know, that happens because that's actually an action figure real. But the main idea is it's an unselfish love, and it should be fine. Now, his next section though is this: but to the rest I say, no, that rest I, the Lord, say, if a brother has a wife who does not believe, and she is willing to live with him, let him not divorce her. And a woman who has a husband who does not believe, if he is willing to live with her, let her not divorce him. So he's basically saying, somehow you end up married to an unbeliever. First, I'll tell you guys all how that's going to happen. It would never happen to you guys, because you're way too smart to ever marry an unbeliever. Sammy and Diego included. Way too smart to ever even think about dating an unbeliever. Way too smart about ever letting your heart fall for an unbeliever. Because your heart can fall for anyone. But if you guard your heart and protect it so that it doesn't fall for someone that is one of those ones, I go head first. I just had a nice long crush on my brother. I'm crushing on a girl right now. Talking to him all about it. That's actually where I was talking to, which I think you three gave me my A and my group message. I told him, I was like, the girl's a little bit younger than him, not quite ready to date. I told him, he's like, yeah, I have to I have to talk to her dad. I'm not doing that for a couple of years. So he said, but I really like her. I was like, you know what? You go all out, man. Like, you know her dad. This is like one of those like Christian families. like one of those legit families, and it's like, yeah, they do the thing for a couple fashion way and everything. Like, I was like, yeah, you better read your Bible a few times. Remember. You better learn to read Greek and Hebrew. You better learn, I was teasing him, you need to step it up. And I told him, you know what, man? It's like, if she knows you like her, and I think the way they talk to each other and stuff, there's kind of feelings, there's a big age gap. But, they really like each other, I think, and it's just way out of bounds right now. So he's just like, so, Mike, just back yourself, man. Turn yourself into the next she deserves. What cooler thing is that than just knowing there's this guy, a boy who likes me, a man who likes me, but until the time, he's just going to try his best to secure a good job so he can provide for me. He's going to continue to be the spiritual leader of the house that I need. And it goes back to when you have two people who start on God. A little wedding video clip I should show you all someday. It's really cool. Anyway, guys, like the triangle, husband, wife, God. The more you climb to the top, the closer you guys are to each other. And so that thing is, but it's easy. Any one of us, rather many a time, has fallen for something they shouldn't have fallen for. Because they're laughing, they're funny, they think you're cute, they think you're nice, they give you attention that other people don't give you. But that stuff might change. And if you're attracted to those things, especially if you're attracted by someone's looks go away with time. Hopefully the relationship wasn't based off looks. Because it's not going to be there for something. Hopefully the relationship wasn't based just off these feelings. Because feelings come and go. But when your relationship is based on something that's rock solid, like someone's faith, when my feelings are the gutter, I know my faith can pull me through that. So, why this might happen, believer and unbeliever? More than likely, hopefully, this is where an unbelieving couple, one person gets saved. One person becomes a believer, the other person is still not. Paul is just saying, if one person gets saved, and the other one's willing to stay with them, don't divorce them. Don't make them go. Stay together. If they're willing to stay with you, stay. And it says here, for the unbelieving husband, verse 14, is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but now they are holy. Interesting verse. What it's not saying is that unsaved spouses become saved because of the spouse. It's not saying necessarily that children are automatically saved or something like that because there's one leader. But what's interesting here, though, is that sanctified is a process of purifying. And if you hang out, if your spouse is a believer and you're not, well, slowly but surely they're going to start purifying you. They're going to stop suggesting certain TV shows are on. They're going to start doing this, start doing that. You'll sit there and bear it as they want to pray through dinner. You know, things like that. And the children now get brought up in a home with that kind of influence there. So, just basically saying, don't make them apart. But in verse 15, here's the other legitimate means of divorce. If the unbeliever departs, let him depart. A brother or sister is in bondage in such cases. But God has called us all to peace. If you become a believer, and the unbeliever's like, I'm done with you, you're freaking crazy. You know, you believe in make-believe people, blah, 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 whatever else. My mom's like, oh, you're just trying, okay, fine, open the door, hit you on the way out. No, like, but it's the idea is if the unbeliever departs from you, if you're a Christian, you're married to an unbeliever, they just don't want to be with you, you can't force them to stay. So God says, you can let them go, but you are free and clear at that point. It does not mean try to drive away. All right, the only way I can get divorced as a Christian is they're an unbeliever, so I have to make sure everyone believes they're an unbeliever, and now you can believe me. No, it's just supposed to be in a legitimate sense. And here's the whole thing. Why do we not date unbelievers? Verse 16. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife? He's just saying right there, don't ever assume you're going to get someone saved. I date him. I can convert him. Definitely not a way to roll the dice. You know, get your whole life and future on the line of maybe another person. So, God has distributed to each one, or is all each one, so let them walk. So I ordained in all the churches. Was anyone called while circumcised? With this whole chunk, and I'll make it sense at all. Let him not become uncircumcised. Was anyone called while uncircumcised? Let him not become circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. But the keeping of the commandments of God is what matters. Let each one remain the same call in which he was called. Were you called while a slave? You shouldn't be concerned about it. But if you can be made free, rather use it. For he who is called in the Lord while a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he who is called while free is Christ's slave. You were bought at a price. Do not become slaves of men. Let each one remain with God in the state in which he was called. All this is basically saying is you don't need to try and change your situation all of a sudden when you become a believer. The example here is like you're married to an unbeliever, and you become a Christian. Like you have this idea of why I divorce them. So I'm supposed to be married to a believer. Now I'm a new creation. No, you can't change that. Well, you have to think about this. Jewish slavery. Biblical Old Testament Hebrew slavery was you had a debt you could not pay. You opted to be a slave for a period of up to 7 years, in which point you go free and your debt is paid off. It's not really slavery, the way we think of slavery. So he's just saying, I became a Christian. Last year I became a slave. I owed someone like $100,000. I became a Christian, and God gave me a new spirit, a new life, and He cleaned away my. Now I can walk off and not be a slave anymore. He's like, no. You were a slave because you had debts. Don't because you're a new Christian means you're not a slave anymore. And he's just kind of saying like, don't think you're just going to switch your whole life around. Now, this does not mean if you were a stripper to keep being a stripper, because that wants me to remain the state I was called. No. Get away. Flee from sexual immorality. We already read that. Verse 18 of chapter 6. But he's saying, like, you don't need to go switch other big parts of your life around. If you were, single, don't think like you need to rush getting married now. The biblical thing is to be married. We're going to get married as fast as possible. You're married to an unbeliever. Oh, I got to get single. So it's like you don't have to try. And he talked about this whole circumcision and uncircumcision. We've already read all through Acts. That really just meant, like, were you Jewish or a Gentile? Well, I was a Gentile when I got saved. I was trying to be more Jewish. I was a Jew when I got saved. Oh, man, I don't want to look like I'm under the law. I got to become as Gentile-looking as possible. No, just say, just be who you are. You're you. You don't need to change who you are when you become a Christian in the sense of the things that make you who you are. I actually had to answer the question today, like, don't you think that Christianity, like, puts it on people, like, to change who they are? I think it's wrong until they change who they are. I don't know what it is. If someone is a thief, is it wrong? Is it wrong? Well, no, that's stupid. I feel like I can't tell you to change. But if someone is a murderer, is it wrong to tell them not to murder? Because that's who they are. They're a murderer. Don't tell them not to be a murderer. What about a liar? Is it wrong to tell people that lying hurts people, deceives people? Well, you know, so what you're saying is, telling people not to sin isn't bad. It's not telling them not to be who they are. Who we are is not these actions that we do, these simple lifestyles. Who we are is like an artist, or an athlete, or an entrepreneur. You are more logical. You're able. That's who we are. It's not these things. So it's like, yeah, remain who you are in the state you are in. Yeah, complete things that are bad. Now concerning virgins. FYI, that is just back then, we're talking about young girls. It could be a 5-year-old, it could be a 14-year-old, but not much older than that because they got married young back then. But it was just an unmarried young girl, is what that meant. I have no commandment from the Lord, yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord in his mercy has made trustworthy. I suppose that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be loose. This is explaining what I was just talking about. Are you loose from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But even married, do not sin. And if a virgin marries, she does not sin, unless she will have trouble in the flesh, but I would spare you. Just talking about the trouble in the sense of just like he's just going back to that whole thought of if you're single, you're married, it's just going to throw a lot on your plate. One of my favorite Proverbs. Proverbs 14:6, 14. Never thought anything of it until someone finally explained to me what it meant, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, that makes perfect sense. Where no oxen are, the trough is clean. Right, Anthony? If you have no cows, the barn is clean. But much increase comes by the strength of an ox. Farm talk, right? What does that mean? Where there are no oxen, the barn is clean, but much increase comes from the strength of an ox. That's Proverbs, so it's involved like something.
It says, but from the strength of an ox come up with an ox.
The strength of an ox, you get an abundant harvest, right? Now, we have tractors today. Before the tractor was the ox. How much work can you get done without the ox versus with the ox? Harvesting without the tractor versus with the tractor. And you know, with a tractor, you have to buy gas, oil, you have to do maintenance, it breaks down, you got to get a mechanic. Would not life be simpler without owning a tractor? Simple. Simple. It's easy. I said simple. But that's the idea. Is like, if you didn't own all these oxen to pull all your plows, the barn would be clean. But sadly, with large barn animals, you have to shovel tons of food into them, and they have to shovel tons of food out from behind them. Non-stop shoveling. The idea is it's worth it. Because without the oxen, you would not get the big harvest. It's worth the extra effort. Marriage is extra effort in life. Paul is just saying, hey, you know, I could save you some trouble if you never married. But it's worth the extra effort in the end. So, all that said, I say this, brethren, verse 29, verse 27, The time is short. So from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they had none. Those who weep as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. Those who buy as though they did not possess. And those of us who use this world as not misusing it, for the form of this world is passing away. Basically, all he was trying to tell them, time is short. The people in the Bible lived because they actually believed Jesus could come at any. They had in their mind Jesus could return tomorrow, and they chose to live like it. Inspiring words for me was the thought that we look at the people in the Bible. We look at Peter like he was a great man and a great apostle and a great Christian. Versus, and then today, we're like normal, and he was like something great. As opposed to Peter was
I'll see you guys
normal.
later.
Yeah.
Wait. That's what I'm leaving too. Wait, how's them?
I'm turning volume up, Daniel. Maybe I shouldn't. Let me finish my thought, see if Diego figures out. We look at Peter as being great, and that's
Hey, I'll see you guys later.
all right. Bye, Diego. We love you.
Bye.
Bye, Sammy.
Bye.
That's not weird. Yeah, like, hey. As opposed to Peter was a normal Christian, and a lot of us are past something and put down on us. This isn't me and myself. Like, this isn't just like you guys. This is what I talk to, like myself, my peers, other Christians I know, like me. That it's like, these guys live the time was short. Jesus could come back tomorrow. If he came back tomorrow, would I like how he found me? Would I have said and done the things I did today if I knew today was my last day to get things done on this earth? And if we really live that way, how will we live differently? Here's the big thing. I don't say we knew more than we knew back then. But there's my prophecy that's fulfilled today that wasn't fulfilled back then. And for the last 2,000 years, some prophecies have not been fulfilled. The last generation. In the 40s, when Israel became a nation again, God said that I go prophecy. It's ridiculous how many there are. I'm going to take you, Ezekiel is a bunch. I'm going to scatter you. Jews are going to be in Russia. Jews are going to be in Germany. Jews are going to be in America. It's in countries. But I'm going to scatter you across the whole globe. And you're going to be persecuted. The Bible said this thousands of years ago. You're going to be picked on more than any other people. And then I'm going to bring you back. 2,000 years, they had no home. Almost 2,000, 1,900 or whatever. And then God put them back to Israel, which was unheard of any nation. No civilization has ever gone more than 100 years displaced like that and kept their religion and their racial ethnicity was all maintained. All that said, we have prophecy today that shows the end is really near, in my personal opinion. Just gonna throw it out there. I haven't said that before. Anything in the Bible I just points to the end being really near. Has anyone seen? I know a couple of you have seen. I had this old time. Raise your hand. I'm just gonna show that PowerPoint. You guys who are guys.
Yeah.
He says last year, but wake up.
What?
All right. Who remembers what the eighth earth was according to the Bible? We just looked at Bible verses. It's just a PowerPoint, and I just took a Bible verse. We took a date. The destruction of Israel, the rebuilding of Israel, was a day like secular history. Like you can go back and find ancient sources and talk about the building it. We took that year, and the Bible says, well, that happened 70 years after this. And that happened in 80 years after this king was there. And this king built the temple in his 40th birthday. Well, that king was born in this year, and he was son of him, and they wandered for 420 years. Okay, and we backtracked. When we backtracked, I made that PowerPoint in like 2012 or 13. 2012 or 13. And in that year I made it, it put the age of the earth at 5,999 years.
You showed it in the first Bible study.
We did that like way back when, yeah. I think I've done that PowerPoint like on the side. I think I did. So it's like before, but anyway, that was the age to show. Now I also mentioned that there's all these months, like every birthday just as a year, right? Someone's born in January, someone's born in December, right? There's lots and lots of genealogies where months and months, could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years maybe off because of just all the months that would add up from every genealogy. But the point is this. This is just one of the reasons I think the world is becoming consumed. Israel is a nation again. And the Bible talks about how the generation that saw it become a nation would by no means pass away. What does that mean exactly? Some people thought one generation, like 30 or 40 years, makes a generation. Some people say, no, the people who were alive when that happened that generation would not die out before the end happened. It's 1947. It's older than my parents by 10 years. So, other prophecies. Jesus said in the end there'd be wars, rumors of wars, there'd be great earthquakes. Go look at a graph of earthquakes, the size and the frequency of earthquakes, how big they are and how they're happening over the last 100 years. Look at this. Okay, all natural disasters, bigger than ever before. Wars and rumors of wars. Look at the Middle East, and the weird things that were going on in the 70s. Late 70s, like 79, 80, there were people get mad. In the world, and how dare they say that? Look, it never happened. And if you go back and look at what's going on, there's prophecies about Russia actually attacking Israel and Russia aligning with modern Iran. Because they're Old Testament Bible locations, but if you look at modern locations, Russia and Iran these days. Russia over the last 2 years has been mobilizing all their forces and becoming a big military power again. Iran, if anyone knows about Iran, they're not our friends. They're not happy. America hates Satan. They want us dead. They want Jerusalem dead. The Bible says that they're attacked. Yada, yada, yada. All that stuff. The stirring in the Middle East. Like when Bill and I drove together 3 years ago, the nuclear stuff with weapons facilities in Iran was really high. We thought the war was going to happen. And we were like, man, it's any day now. What did Jesus say it would be like? It'd be like birth pangs, going into labor. You're going to see something that looks like it, and it's going to go away. And it's harder, and it's going to go away. But it's going to get closer and closer together, and the intensities keep spiking until finally that happens. But the other thought is this. I mentioned that age of the earth thing, right? About 5,999 years, that was a couple of years ago. So this would put us at 6,002 or something like that. There's a lot of numbers. It would be so convenient, right? You'd almost think the Bible's a story. But no, if we take it as truth, it's all true. It always proves to be true. It keeps showing it's true again and again and again and again. It's weird that certain numbers always show up. God's number for leadership is 12. There was 12 disciples. There was 12 tribes in Israel. Now, 12 major leaders in the Old Testament, 12 in the New. It's not by chance. 40 is always this time of separation and time things away. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights when that flood started. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days with God. Jesus was dead for 40 days with Satan. That number always comes true. 7 is a number of completeness. God always put 7 in the Bible. It completes our week. He completed the earth in the 7th day. 6 is a number for incompleteness. The mark of the beast is 666. Anytime you see things in a row, it kind of means the most intense meaning of that. That's why they always say, you don't hardly ever read, and the angels never say, holy is the Lord. Angels always say, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. They say it 3 times because it's so powerful when it comes to the beast. All that said, there's also a model in the Bible. God created the earth in 6 days. On the 7th day, he rested. God told the Israelites to work for 6 days. On the 7th day, they should This pattern of 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. Revelation 19, for those who remember our Revelation study, talked about, where am I going? Revelation 19 is a long period of time.
So they're making a rapture, and then
No, it's after all that.
We were just live here and then
After you live here with Jesus for how long?
1,000 years.
For 1,000 years of peace and rest. We follow our pattern. The age of the earth is somewhere right around 6,000 years old, according to the Bible. And we're promised a 7,000 rest period. This is not, there's no Bible thing that says the earth will live 6,000. No, that's not in there. But there are patterns in the Bible we see over and over and over again. And we see this pattern of 6 years, 6 days, and 1 rest. 6 and 1 rest. Work, there's the Sabbath years in the Old Testament. Work the ground for 6 years, and then they had to take 1 year off of tilling the ground and let it rest for a year. There's all these 6 and 1. 6 years of work, 1 year if you can't work the field, just let the field grow. And then you go back next year, you'll do it again. 6 days of work and 1 rest. 6 days of creation and rest. There's 1,000 years, 1,000 years of rest and peace promised in Revelation. I mean, there's 6,000 years of the world going on as it goes. If that timeline I put up is accurate, and this is the year 6002. Yeah, like I said, just there's a whole factor of be off by this much, this or that. You don't know. There's a lot of things that point, as he said here. But this I say, brethren, the time is short. And he was just going on to encourage them to kind of just focus on those things, because you just never know. Now, at the same time, it doesn't mean so, like go cuckoo. Guys, like, well, there's different ages here, right? But like, it would have been your like 8th grade. It was my first year teaching. So my first year in Grandview was like the 2010-11 school year. So those seniors, I remember because we talked about my math class, and like we were talking about Harold Camping predicted the end of the world, May something, and people were selling everything they owned, like moving down there to Harold Camping when it happened. They came and it went. Sad for the people who like sold off all their belongings. Kind of a foolish thing. God wants us to keep occupying the earth. He told us to be fruitful, multiply, take care of the earth, to all the beasts, the birds. He told man to take care of the earth. Let's keep doing that. Let's not just sell off everything for the same. And he's talking about like you might not have tomorrow. And you know what? If Jesus doesn't come back tomorrow, again, I'm going back to right now today, right? Cameron, great, and he's inspired me and touched my life just in the single thought that Cameron went out to play basketball with Pastor Billy Wheeler. After a few rounds of basketball, Billy Wheeler getting a deceased Cameron Stevens CPR. Cameron was dead. Dead. Right? Not like out, not like suffering, not like, almost dead. Cameron was out, dead. 100% dead. Cameron came back to life, like 8 minutes later or whatever. You know how long 8 minutes is? Like just, can we make it 8 seconds? Okay, I'm just thinking like 8 seconds, right? Your friend is dead on the ground. Time's going slow. But all that point, Cameron had no plans to be dead that day. Cameron was like 24. Not that much older than you guys. Much younger than your parents. So the point is that I posted. And we'll kind of pick up in the middle of chapter 7. Look, I'm reading. I posted this on Facebook, so some of you may have seen it. Highlighted right here. Often we hear the prayer, Lord, you are able to do this. that prayer is very good and may build up confidence in prayer, but, and on this important note, to say that God is able, not faith. Here is a simple but important picture of our lack of faith these days. I myself believe that God once turned water to wine and is able to turn into pure gold the desk on which I'm writing. It's like 34 inches. What a wonderful slab of gold that would make. What good outlets for the money which the gold would bring me. But, and here's where I fail. I do not have the faith to believe that God will turn this desk into gold. My theology, what I believe in my head, says that I can do it, but on the faith in it, I fail. And if I've said it before, that is where I highlight the whole thing. One of these days, someone will read the Bible for the first time, believe it, and act on it with a daring, simple faith. Then we longtime believers will bow in shame, crying, Lord, help our unbelief. So when Jesus healed the man's son, Jesus says, he who believes all things are possible. Mark 9:23, Spanish church, to a Spanish church, and they made me memorize it right there on the spot. Gosh, they're crazy. Anyway, but next verse, 9:24. The guy tells Jesus, Lord, I believe, help me with my unbelief. Just talking about how, Lord, I do believe in you. I have faith. I have a saving faith. I'm a Christian. But I still have a hard time settling some thoughts. The thought that my head, my doctrine, I know that all unbelievers go to hell. I will teach this. But if I really settled with that in my heart, do I really believe it? It's one thing to say I believe it, it's another thing to have it sink in. It's that kind of stuff. The closer God helps us get to really understanding those things, the more impactful it can be on us, because we're crazy things. Because we just realize, hell's real, heaven's real. Whoa, life could end tomorrow. Jordan could be gone tomorrow. My mom could be gone tomorrow. We all could be gone tomorrow. Hopefully Jordan will be here. But the point is but if we really think about that, and it's then you start thinking okay, but if you knew that the person was gone tomorrow, and really confident in where they're at with the Lord, should I talk to them and just double check? Just really make sure. What about how I spend my free time? This is one of those things where it can start having an effect on us. Okay, well, maybe it's a good time for the Lord to catch me praying. When he came back tonight, I wanted him to catch me after Bible study going home and doing this or doing that. But the moments where it's Lord, please don't come back now. Come back tomorrow. We'll do better tomorrow. Anyway, I was encouraging them. I think those disciples, Jesus says, I'll come back for you. They just lived every day like that could be the day Jesus was coming back. And blind people able to see, people who couldn't walk, they could walk, dead people were raised to life, entire cities were converted. Anthony raised his hand.
I had a question about when people die, do they go to sleep? Or do they actually go to heaven
Straight away. To be out of the body is to be in the presence of the Lord. The Bible says
what about Cameron?
So, here's the thing with Cameron, because Cameron wondered about that. Cameron struggled with that. Here's one of the things, this is just my theory. My theory. I think God knew he was going to bring Cameron back.
That's what he did.
And so I think God kind of left Cameron be.
Yeah.
One thing to think about, because people talk about visions of heaven and hell. And we had that conversation breaking leaves 1 year ago. Well, and we talk about how do you authenticate something like that? Well, it sounds really real. Well, the only thing we can compare it to is the Bible. But that said, it's just sometimes tough. And Cameron said, what does that say for me? All these other people say, well, I didn't see anything. Cameron says he has a personal struggle with those statements. He's like, well, what does that mean about me? If I didn't see anything, does that make me not happy? Does that mean I wasn't this or wasn't that? Or, so it's an interesting place to think about. But I think that is a factor. I do think that. I think God knew that it wasn't going to end there.
And why do the people who came back say that they did? You're saying that God knew that he did send them back. Then that wouldn't make sense.
And so it is, though, is that we basically don't have what we have. I will say this, not every. I'm not trying to do every story, so I don't think we can. There's a lot of people who come back and actually said they hadn't really seen stuff. There's other people who see, they think there was one guy had a vision of heaven, another guy had a vision of heaven, they were contradictory. So which one's right? That's where I say it gets hard, because sometimes I think one of the best articles I read, they just made a few points. And John MacArthur makes the point, he said, one, what is interesting is that in the Bible, a few people got to see him. Of the four, two wrote about it in detail. Some detail. John does, Revelation. Isaiah does, in Isaiah 6. In both those stories, they don't talk about the people there. They don't talk about lost loved ones. They don't talk about scenery around them. All they talk about is God and his glory. And it's like they get to heaven, it's just like, oh my God.
I have pizza. I just came out for you and then to go back. Let's go to sleep.
I'll take your pizza.
I have to go.
Sorry.
No.
No, you don't. You know where the plates are at. But yeah, that's just the thought, is that, like you just said, like, so we can compare it to these biblical from the Bible. So I said we can trust the Bible ones, and everyone else we can compare it. And it's one of those ones that's like, well, if it seems in line with the Bible, we can say it's positive. But it's one of those ones I can't bank on. It ends like that. That must be exactly what it ends like, because it is like, well, this other guy said it was different. And there's actually people who have visions of hell as well. There's actually been books written about it, and like saying just like about heaven, but it's like different. Thank you very much. Yes, it's glorious. So, I think the idea of visions of heaven and hell. I think we have to be mature, and we can listen to them, entertain that they could be real, entertain that they could be false, that we could learn a little bit about heaven. Because there are some stories I've heard, I don't know if I trust they're true. Like, I've won my mind particularly, and I wish it was true. But I can't say it. It takes more time. I want to sing a song. Tara's supposed to be. Oh my gosh, she's already late. You're in trouble.
Like half an hour.
Oh. So, okay, I'll give you the short version of it. There was a guy who said he found the Ark of the Covenant, the big golden box, right? Which we said earlier tonight, so we see the attention. What was on top of the big golden box? Angels, and in between the angels,
The little
mercy seat. Which goes there?
Blood.
What blood?
of the sacrifice.
Which sacrifice?
The one that like takes away all the sin from the people who do it.
Israelites, okay? Once a year, they put the blood from the spotless lamb on there because it's the people. This man's claim was he was going to all these like tunnels under Israel, under Jerusalem specifically, and like a lot of them you're not allowed to go to because they collapse. Some are controlled by Muslims, some are controlled by the Jews, some are controlled in the Christian sectors. Anyway, all that said, his claim was that he was under there, and that I think he was an angel guy. Which always makes you wonder even more. But to a room, like a hidden tunnel, cave room, where he found the Ark of the Covenant, Goliath's sword, and a couple other things, which theoretically could line up because he was the Ark of the Covenant disappeared. The Babylonians came and took over Israel. I thought it was Jeremiah. It was rumored. This is old legend did tunnels, taking the ark and the most important Jewish artifacts and hid them under, took a tunnel and hid them somewhere where the Babylonians would never find them. And so if he had gone underground and outside the city walls and buried them in a cave under a little hill just outside the city. So that's where he says he found it, underside this hill. Well, said hill was the hill known as Golgotha. It's Hebrew. Which in Greek is Calvary, which is the hill where Jesus was crucified on, just outside the city walls. And his claim was Christ, who died a very bloody and gory death, that his blood would have gone from the cross to the ground, through the ground, just poured down, drip by drip, and that it actually went down into the cave and landed on the mercy seat of the ark. And it's one of those things, when I heard that, I was like, wow. And that story is only in the Bible, where sometimes stories are just almost too perfect to be up. I think the whole veil thing from the top down is one of those things, right? That's very deep when you think about the meaning of that. Like those little details, like, no, the more you read it, the more you learn. I just think about that all the time. All these people scoff at the Bible. It's like, dude, you don't have a clue what you're talking about. I spent years studying this stupid thing, and I keep finding things out that blow my mind on a regular basis. It's like, the more in awe I am. So it's like, obviously, if you don't have a understanding, it's because you just don't know what you're talking about. That's just my personal opinion. People who's
The digger ID. The digger ID.
what?
It's how
You caught that, Jimmy?
too. You're right.
When you dig deep,
You got
There
it.
we go.
The digger.
The digger ID.
I didn't catch it until like a minute after you said it.
No, I was like,
The digger.
So, anyway, I don't know if I can compare that's true, but it's pretty cool. But that's one of those ones where I always take it that way. So that's what I said. I think the visions of heaven stories, I take them kind of in a similar way. It's like I have only one thing I can just trust is truth. And everything else is like, that sounds cool. And as long as it lines up with the Bible, hopefully it's like that. Like that's one of those things too, where you can just kind of be like, that sounds nice. Hopefully it is something like that, but I just can't bank on I can bet my life on it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's what I said. So it's sometimes just tough to verify things. You want to sing a song?
yeah, I want water.
Okay. You need 30 seconds. Yes.
So you want me to go, right?
I won't get up for 2 hours. I'm so tired.